Hello, welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a great Christmas and a couple of days off. And if you're still in that season of having time off, I hope you're having a good one, whatever it is you're doing. This week, I thought we'd do just a bit of a roundup of everything in the year and just pick out some of the things that I thought were really interesting this year and the ones that kind of stuck in my mind. I did this last year. It's a good time to do it because honestly, not very much is happening right now. So kind of makes sense. So I did look back across the year and in some ways quite a lot has happened. I don't know about you, it's quite hard to kind of separate this year from last year. They all kind of rolled into one with everything that's been going on at the moment. But I have, looking back at the kind of the big key moments throughout the year in terms of technology, in terms of teams, and in terms of being a Microsoft Teams developer, there's definitely things that have come up and things that are of interest. So that's what we're going to do this week. We're just going to go through, I've got 5 things to talk about, and then also going to think a little bit about next year. Okay, so the very first thing I want to talk about is, let's go all the way back to March and Microsoft Ignite in March and some kind of announcements made there. And the really big one that has really kind of fueled a lot of interest and a lot of excitement throughout all of this year has been around Azure Communication Services and around the Teams interop part of Azure Communication Services. And that actually feels, in some ways, it feels like it's been around for quite a long time, but actually it was only announced in March of this year. So this is the ability to have Azure Communication Services, which is new technology, talked about a bit last year, to support doing experiences in web browsers and natively on iOS and Android, voice over IP experiences, WebRTC experiences. And the big announcement in March concerned taking that stuff and bringing it into a Microsoft Teams meeting. So having an Azure Communication Services user be able to join a Microsoft Teams meeting, participate in that meeting, see what's going on, see the other people in that meeting, be controlled just like a Microsoft Teams guest user in that meeting. Really interesting, really powerful, unlocks lots of different scenarios. And that was announced in March of this year. And that's the stuff, by the way, that's just been GA'd at the back end of this year. Really interesting. Also in that time frame, also around March, and very, very similar technology, Microsoft Dynamics and Microsoft Teams integrating together for voice and chat. That was a really big deal and was announced at Ignite. Not with loads and loads of detail, just a kind of big headliner. This is what we're doing, Dynamics, Teams coming together. And actually that has evolved throughout the year to an announcement in the second version of Ignite, because we're in this weird place at the moment where we have 2 Ignites every year. And at the second one, in whenever it was, November, that's when Microsoft really came up and said, look, we're doing a contact center. This is a Microsoft first-party contact center involving Microsoft Teams, involving Dynamics, working together. It's that same stuff that was announced in March, but this is the very kind of, you can buy it today, it's here. So this year has really been the year of Azure Communication Services and feeding some of the, I guess, the back-end technology, the voice over IP stuff that's been powering Microsoft Teams throughout 2020 and obviously before, but has really come to the fore and played such an important part in so many people's lives in 2020 and 2021. We're seeing Microsoft really embed that and take that technology and put it in loads and loads of different places throughout this year, and we're going to see, I think, more of that in 2022. So that's kind of I think one of my I'm jumping ahead now, but we're going to talk about predictions in a bit, but that's definitely one of my predictions is that stuff will come together more and more in 2022. So those are 2 big things that happened towards the sort of beginning of the year. If we go forward a little bit to June, July, summertime, some interesting things. It went kind of not big announcements, but stuff that I was doing. So one thing I really want to call out that I think was useful was I did a how-to of building a COVID reporting app for employees to kind of report things that are happening, like observations that are good or bad about the office setup, a layout, whether that's, run out of hand sanitizer, or something needs doing, or something is right, or something is good, or something is bad, being able to kind of report all that, but using the Power Platform. So it was an exercise really in how to use the Microsoft Power Platform to kind of quickly build solutions that, they might not be long lived. Like, like a COVID-19 employee reporting app might last 2 years or some, it's not needed for like a really long term. The data in it is not necessarily needs to be persisted for really long periods of time or anything like that. It might not be a thing you want to engage an entire development team around, an engineering team around, but actually you need a solution really quickly. And that's where these kind of low code, no code solutions can be really valuable, and quickly bringing together kind of the bits that you've already got. You've already got Microsoft Teams, you've already got the app for Power Automate. Quickly being able to pull these things together. You've already got SharePoint. So SharePoint was the repository I used for kind of keeping all the data. And actually, for an IT person, this is good because SharePoint, you already have it. It's already compliant. It's secured. So that's kind of great. So putting all that stuff together into a quick app, into a quick solution, really, to enable employees to kind of report the things that they're noticing in their offices as they're returning to work. So I did that as a full kind of end-to-end walkthrough. I'll put a description to all the things I'm talking about in the in the links below, so you can go and check that out. And then the other thing around kind of July timeframe that I thought was interesting, I wanted to kind of remind everyone happened, was Microsoft's big announcement that they're moving everything in Teams away from Electron and using WebView 2. Now, it's going to be a while before we see that. I think we're going to see it first in Teams Personal because that's where it's happening first. But I expect, I don't know, but like this is my, assumption, is that it's going to come to all of Microsoft Teams, including the business client as well. But there was an awful lot of confusion, and not misinformation is the wrong word because it implies it's kind of malicious. I don't really mean misinformation. I just mean people not fully getting it, not fully understanding what the announcement was and what it meant. So I put together like a video, I put together a blog post as well, just kind of trying to explain from a developer's perspective actually what was happening here, because I think it just was a bit confusing. That I wanted to call out because I think that confusion lives on. People are still confused about what's happening and the timeframes and all the rest of it. So hopefully that video can kind of help. Other things. So let's go forward in time again to October this year. And this was kind of an interesting one for me. And this blog post, the title of the blog post is Microsoft Teams Export APIs and Change Notifications for Chats and Channels will be chargeable. So this for me was interesting because it's I think the first time we're starting to see kind of Microsoft layer on kind of added value or value added services on top of Microsoft Graph that they plan to charge for. And all of Microsoft Graph has kind of basically been free to use. Obviously you pay, if you're building an application or a solution that accesses the data, then you're going to pay the networking, you're going to pay the compute and all that sort of stuff. But there's actually been no charge to use Microsoft Graph. And that sort of makes sense. That ties in, with a messaging from Microsoft that really it's your data, we're not going to charge you to access it and all the rest of it. What we're seeing actually though is, whilst that is still true, there are some services being layered on top of Microsoft Graph that are chargeable, that are still you accessing your data but in slightly different ways. One of those is the export APIs, and one of those are change notifications for chats and channels in bulk. So these are things where Microsoft are layering on a charging cost. It's a bit complicated, and there's definitely exemptions, there's inclusions, there's stuff that you may get charged for, there's stuff you won't get charged for, and it comes down a little bit to what the type of application as well. So if it's a security and compliance application, then a lot of that usage can be included as part of your E5 licenses if you've got those. If it's not one of those applications, that inclusion can't happen even if you've got E5 licenses. So it's quite a complicated picture, made more complicated in a way by the fact that actually right now Microsoft are not charging anybody for anything. They're planning on bringing this charging structure in. So they've laid out the structure, they've laid out the model and how it's going to happen, but they haven't actually started charging people yet. And part of that, I think, is probably they just want to gauge the feedback and gauge how it's going to land in the market, but also probably realistically, they might not have all the stuff on the back end ready to actually enact charging and actually physically charge people yet. So I think we'll see that coming in 2022. That is worth keeping an eye on as a developer for sure. I don't really know how I feel about it. On one side, like Microsoft's a business, they need to make money. Like I get that. They're not charging for access to data specifically, because you can still access this same data. You can always access your data for free. These are value add services that make a developer's life much easier. They provide a different type of access to the data, and I think it makes sense if Microsoft want to charge for those. That is a hard one to argue against, unless you want to go down that kind of slightly, I suppose, moralistic view around access to data. But there's that side of things. On the other side, I feel like the worry I have is that it might change how people approach how they architect solutions. So I like people to architect solutions that are the best for the right technology. The decisions that are being made for the architecture being used are purely technical. As soon as you start to layer in business reasons, yes, I'm going to go down this architecture route because it's not the best architecture, but I don't have to pay any charges if I go this way. So suddenly now you're molding your architecture for business reasons, and that grates with me a little bit. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out. I feel like 2022 is when we're going to figure it out, and when we're going to find out what that charging structure is like, how it's charged, where the money goes, where it's collected, who pays, and we'll see how it's evaluated in the market, and we'll go from there. So that's going to be one to watch. But yeah, did all of that all happened in October, that blog post, so you can go and check that out as well. And then this year has been a year where I've tried to talk to lots of different people. 2020 was a year when we all stayed at home. 2021 we're starting to get out and about a little bit, and I've been trying to find more and more people to talk to bring more it's good for me to understand more about what's going on in the world in this as we evolve and as Teams evolves and the development platform evolves. It's useful for me to understand and keep up to date with everything that's going on, but also I feel like it's useful information I can bring back to all of you as well. And so tried to talk to lots of different people, and it was kind of hard to pull out one person, but to kind of bring and include in this kind of top 5 or review of the year. But I've chosen Don Osaka, my interview with Don Osaka, just because I thought it was a really interesting interview, and I thought the content was really, really interesting as well. Donna's a fantastic person, very interesting person to talk to and to listen to. She's had an awful lot of experience in a lot of different areas. She does lots of different things simultaneously, which I find really interesting, especially as somebody juggling lots of different things and having to very carefully plan my time. I can kind of appreciate the effort that must go in for her into doing lots of different things. She's got lots of different side hustles going on as well as the main job. So I thought that was really interesting to talk to her a little bit about that. And she's very, very passionate about accessibility as well. And so she's got some great tips there in that interview as well. So I wanted to include that interview because I thought it was really interesting. But in general terms, it's been great to get out and talk to more and more people. I hope to do more of it next year as well. All right. So those really are the big kind of pillars, I think, for 2021, looking back on it for me, that make up, what 2021 was like in weekly updates. It was a good year, lots going on. Lots of fun things. Looking to 2022, what do I think we're going to see? Okay, I'm not going to try and predict the future because that's pretty dangerous. But I do think, I've said this already, I do think we'll see more Azure Communication Services and Microsoft Teams working together. Definitely, for sure. I think we'll see that show up in more and more places. I think we already know this is not a prediction because we've already been told it. We know there's going to be stuff with Microsoft Loop and the Fluid Framework coming. I'm excited to dig into the Fluid Framework stuff in a way that I haven't really done yet. Really understand it and start using it. So expect to see some videos and how-tos from me on using the Fluid Framework and using Microsoft Loop components more and more in building applications. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Teams developers can use those Microsoft Loop components inside their applications in Teams and how that works with Microsoft Teams, what the interplay between first party and third party is when it comes to keeping data up to date and keeping information that's displayed in lots of different places up to date. So I think that's going to be really interesting. So there's that. One thing I do think is worth keeping an eye on is Microsoft Mesh. So that was also, announced in 2021, showed off, in the first Ignite, shown off in the second Ignite, very much so, in terms of you saw how Mesh was coming into Microsoft Teams. That's worth keeping an eye on, I think. I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff roll out in 2022. I don't yet fully know what the developer picture for Microsoft Mesh is going to look like inside Microsoft Teams. That's something I think we're going to find out in 2022, though. And then just finally, just nothing to do with Teams and development, really. I think 2022 will be probably the year as well in which I'm going to try and just kind of improve my own setup here. We've been through a couple of iterations, and you've been on them with me as I've been doing these weekly updates, where we've gone from, I'm out and about quite a lot, so my weekly updates are all over the place, to suddenly we're all at home, and I've been in different places around the house as we've figured out what it feels like to have what it's like when everybody works at home. We've settled in this blue study, and now that we've settled here, and we've done this for nearly a year, I think, or probably just over a year actually, in this kind of office study that I've been in, feels like going into 2022 I'm going to spend more and more time doing videos, doing content here, and so I want to invest some time in making that experience as good as it can be for you. So that's probably going to come in terms of better audio, better video, and stuff like that. For me, in a way, that's kind of like a nice project thing as well. It's kind of a hobby. If I'm not careful, like the whole doing Teams development as a day job, then talking about Teams development as a kind of a side gig, it's all very samey, so it's hard for me to judge the kind of the work, the play stuff. So it's nice for me to have like an additional hobby that is related to it as well. And so AV Kit is the biggest rabbit hole of geeky technology to fall into. Like there's a million YouTube videos I've been watching, and there's so much choice, there's so many things to play with. So I'm going to try and invest a bit of time and some money into doing some of that stuff, because I think that'd be fun, but also it means that you'll all benefit as well, hopefully. But the most important thing is the content, so that's where I'm going to keep going and keep spending the time. More videos, more how-tos, more source code, going to keep with the weekly updates. That's my plan for 2022. We'll see what happens. I'm sure Microsoft have got plans for 2022 as well. I'm sure they're going to come out the gates once things ramp up again, probably going into March, I guess, for Ignite. There's a bit of a guess, but I don't think we've got the dates yet. But that kind of tends to be when conference season starts up again and the announcements kind of start up again. So that's going to be good to see. But yeah, I'm sure Microsoft have their own plans as well, and so we'll just have to keep up with those as well, and I'll keep talking about them, keep telling you the stuff I find out and the stuff I know, and we'll all find out together. All right, that is it for 2021 in weekly updates. Have a fantastic rest of year, and a very happy and prosperous and safe 2022, and I will see you on the other side.